Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video I'm going to be talking about Part P of the building regulations, which relates to electrical work in dwellings in the UK. Now I'm specifically going to be talking about Part P in England, which is where I'm based obviously, but it's important to point out that there are different regulations in different parts of the UK, and that changed in 2013 or 2014 I think it was, and that's because of devolution in different parts of the UK. The devolved governments in the different parts of the UK, such as Wales, have different building regulations. So it's important to point out that Part P is slightly different in different parts of the UK, and so if you're from England and you want to go and do a job in Wales or in Scotland, really important to check out what the regulations are in those parts of the UK. Now I've been around long enough to remember when Part P was first introduced, so you may be thinking, well, why is James talking about Part P today? I'll explain more later on in this video, but first of all I just want to talk about where it does apply. So Part P was first introduced back in 2005, and then it was changed in April 6th 2013 for use in England. So if you look up on the .gov website, you'll find Part P 2013 for use in England. So back in 2003 the government announced that it was introducing Part P. Originally it was for England and Wales. So this introduced a legal requirement in England and Wales for work in dwellings. But the change to Part P that came about in 2013 that just applied to England made a change to the type of work that was notifiable. So now notifiable works includes the installation of a new circuit, the replacement of a consumer unit, or any addition or alteration to an existing circuit in a special location. Now, the special location now in England is just the bathroom. Originally it was the kitchen as well. But as I understand it, these changes didn't happen in Wales, for example, where I believe that kitchens are still notifiable. Now, Wales has its own version of Part P, and you can look that up on the net, and so it's completely different. So my advice to anybody working in the electrical industry in the UK is, if you are going to be doing electrical work in a dwelling in different parts of the UK, is to check up on the relevant government website to find out what the requirements are. Now in England, all we need to do is to look up on the .gov.uk website and we can find the approved document P, which will tell us, it says on there 2013 edition for use in England. So it tells us there what the changes were, and you can scroll through and find out exactly what the changes are. It describes what the approved document is and how to work in with other approved documents that do apply to electricians as well. But if I just scroll through, it does explain what's notifiable, what's not notifiable. I'll just have a look through here. And so what I'm looking for is the scope, and it's really worth having a read through the Part P document to see exactly what is required. So it says here that Part P applies to electrical installations in a dwelling, house or flat, and to part of the installations that are outside of the dwelling, for example fixed lighting, air conditioning attached to the outside walls, photovoltaic panels on roofs, and fixed lighting and pond pumps in gardens, in outbuildings and sheds, detached garages and greenhouses, in the common areas of blocks of flats such as corridors and staircases. That's really, really important. If you're doing anything in a communal area, in a block of flats, that is also relevant to Part P. And then it goes on to say Part P does not apply to electrical installations that are in a business premises in the same building but is metered separately. It doesn't apply to a separate power supply for lifts in blocks of flats, for example. And so then it goes on and it talks about notifiable work, and this is what I wanted to point out, is that although the scope of Part P includes all those electrical work within the dwelling, the work that's notifiable is specified here. And so that consists of installation of a new circuit, replacement of a consumer unit, or any additional alteration to an existing circuit in a special location. In this version of Part P in England, special location means anywhere within a room containing a bath or shower, basically. So we're talking about bathrooms. It also includes a room containing swimming pool or sauna heater. So that is the difference between the original Part P that came out back in 2005, which did originally include kitchens, but now it only includes bathrooms, and that is just in England. It didn't change in other parts of the UK. So if you look on the relevant government websites in the different parts of the UK, such as Wales or Scotland, to check on the requirements in those parts of the UK. Now Part P also talks about work that isn't notifiable. So the point I want to make in this video is that it's not just the location within the dwelling that's important, it's the type of work as well. So any work in a special location such as a bathroom is notifiable. In other parts of the property, if you're introducing a new circuit, for example, So say you want to install a new socket, and the easiest way to do that is to take a length of cable from where you want the socket to where the consumer unit is. That's going to be a new circuit, that's going to be notifiable. So it's really important to bear in mind that it doesn't just apply to the special locations as defined in Part P, it applies to the type of work as well. So I want to talk a little bit now about why I've come to make this video today, because as I say, Part P has been around for some time. The reason that and I'm just reading off of my computer here, the reason why I'm talking about this today is earlier on this week I noticed an article in a well-known newspaper, I won't say which one, and it was an article that I found online, and it was an article about DIY electrical work, and I'll just see if I can find it now so I can show you. Okay, so I've just looked up the article online, and you can look this up for yourself. As I say, I won't say which paper it was, and I won't share the actual article with you because I don't want to get into any kind of copyright issues or anything like that, but I'm just going to talk about this and give you my personal opinion on this. So the title of the article is A Beginner's Guide to Electrical Wires and How to Navigate Them in DIY. So when I saw this article, it grabbed my attention, obviously, when I see anything to do with electrical work in the paper. So there's a few things in this article that I didn't agree with, and I'll just go through those now. So the first thing that I noticed in this article, and I'm just going to read from it now, it says, first things first, it's important to remember that Part P of the UK building regulations makes it illegal to carry out DIY electrics in the bathroom or kitchen. So that is the reason why I want to talk about Part P, and just to clarify the differences between where Part P applies in different parts of the UK, but also to point out that it's not just relevant to bathrooms and kitchens, it applies to the type of electrical work as well. So I thought that that was something that needed clarifying in this article, and so yeah, it's important to bear in mind it's not just the bathroom or kitchen, it's the type of electrical work. And then it goes on to say electricity is dangerous, so anything beyond changing a bulb, rewiring a plug or spur socket should be left to a qualified electrician, which is reasonable. But then it goes on to say electric wires for DIY are relatively easy. Which is something that I find surprising that anybody would say that. And then it says the first step is to turn off the electrics at the mains power supply. This is easy to locate and is typically the largest switch and is bright red. Now this again is something that needs clarifying, because when you want to isolate the supply to make it safe to work on, just switching off the switch is not sufficient to do that. It's necessary to lock off the circuit breaker and keep the key on you to make sure that nobody else can turn the power on while you're working on it. Now this is something that I think all electricians who are watching there will be familiar with. It's something that we all talk about. And if you imagine that even if you're doing work at home, imagine if you turn off one of the circuit breakers and the Wi-Fi goes off. Of course, other people in the house are going to be thinking, oh, why isn't my computer working? They're going to go looking for the reason why it's not working, and there is a big risk there that somebody might switch on the circuit breaker while you're working on it. So really important to point out that although it's good to point out to people how to isolate the electrics in their home, really important to point out that if you want to make it safe to work on it, you need to lock it off, okay, to make it safe to work on. So that's something else there that I disagreed with in this article. Then it goes on to talk about the cable types and the cable colours, and it says in domestic wiring situations there are essentially two different types of cable, 2 core and earth and 3 core and earth. The live wire is brown, neutral is blue, and the earth is green and yellow. Now this again is something that I think needs clarifying, because if you take off a switch off the wall, for example, then you'll notice that there are different coloured wires in there, but both are going to be live. You'll have the switch feed and the switch line. One will be brown and the other one will be blue. Now both of those wires will be live. Now it's true to say that both of them should be marked brown, or it might be red if it was the previous wiring colours. But how many times have we as electricians come across installations where the switch lines are not marked live? So it's really important to point out that when you're taking switches off the wall, for example, even if you're doing something simple as just releasing it off to do a bit of wallpaper around it or paint around it, something like that, it's important to point out that it's not just the brown wire that's live. And especially if you consider two-way lighting, for example, where you're going to have your switch feed, switch line and the strappers that go between, the 3 core that go between the 2 light switches. All of those cables are going to be potentially live, but they're going to be different colours because they're going to be the different cores of the cables that have been used to do that. Now, in situations where they haven't been highlighted as live, which of course they should be, but I've come across lots of situations where they're not. So it's just important to point out that it's not just the brown that might be live, so care is needed there. So what else does it say here? So here it talks about changing a light fitting, and it says they will need to be in the same configuration in the new light fitting. So it's worth remembering this. Taking a photo before you start is a very easy way to make sure you don't forget and have something to reference during the process. Now, this again is a really good example. I mean, how many times have we as electricians come across situations where someone has taken down a pendant light fitting and then they've got stuck when it comes to putting the light fitting back up again? And it's something really I would recommend anybody, if you're not sure, please get an electrician to do this for you. Now, I know just from reading the comments on my channel that most of my viewers are people in the industry and will probably be agreeing with everything that I say, but if you're not an electrician and you're interested in doing something at home, I would recommend getting an electrician for anything like that. Then another thing that it talks about is labels. So it goes on to say, it's a good idea to make sure you have a modern consumer unit protecting your circuits and appliances rather than an old-fashioned fuse box. Fair enough. And then he says, your unit should have a series of switches that are clearly labelled. This allows you to isolate or turn off specific circuits to safely carry out tasks such as changing a light fitting. Now, this is true, consumer units should be labelled, but how many times have we as electricians come across situations where consumer units are not labelled at all, or they are labelled but the labels aren't correct? So as I say, there's a few things in that article that I didn't agree with. Now, I think that, you know, pointing out the dangers of electricity when it comes to doing DIY work is a good thing to talk about. For example, if even a simple DIY task such as hanging a picture on the wall, you know, you need to be sure that you're not going to put a nail through any cables or anything like that. Or even if you just wanted to loosen light switches off the wall to paint around them, things like that, it's really useful for DIYers to be able to be aware of the dangers of electricity and to be able to isolate at their consumer unit, because consumer units are designed to be operated by ordinary persons. But when it comes to doing actual electrical work, I strongly recommend that anybody who is an electrician get the advice of an electrician to do certain things for you, especially bearing in mind the things that are notifiable for Part P. So if you want to do anything in the bathroom, even if it's very, very minor, that is notifiable for Part P. If you want to do anything that includes introducing a new circuit, that is notifiable for Part P. So there are different ways of notifying for Part P. One way is to use an electrician that is registered with a government approved Part P scheme. Now, another way of doing it is to notify your local council, but that has to be done before any electrical work is carried out. So I strongly recommend to anybody watching that if you're not an electrician and you want to get some electrical work done that may come under the scope of Part P, then please do contact an electrician. And my advice to any electricians watching is do have a look on the website, on the .gov website, to check up on the requirements of Part P, and do bear in mind that it may be different in different parts of the UK, such as Wales, for example, and it's possible to look up on the Welsh Government website to find out what the requirements are over there as well. Another thing to bear in mind is that the wiring regulations were recently updated, and I've made a few videos about that on my channel. If you want to see those, I'll put a link at the top of the screen.